I'm laughing because we have chickens, as you well know.
Yeah,
I got them about a year ago or so.
yeah, yeah,
And I speak to them, and the three little chicks that we raised from the beginning, they have names, and I call them, and they understand their name. They'll come when I say their name. I don't care where they are in the
yeah.
yard. They'll
Right.
come running. It's like, and they'll
Yeah.
stand next to us, like, go eat, and they'll go eat. So yes, they understand too. They're highly
Yeah.
intelligent. Welcome to Attitude of Altitude podcast, presented by Planet of One. We're sharing stories and conversations, encouraging and empowering listeners to be bold, take action, and be your best self, so we may be the change we desire to see in this world. Know that your attitude determines your altitude in life. Welcome to the podcast.
So obviously this is limited structure in the beginning. um,
Which is
um,
better.
yeah, I mean, we can always find some place to put stuff, but I am fascinated by language, and this is kind of a good segue because how we were speaking about this before is that when you're brought up in I would say most other countries, you have to learn a second language, right? I mean,
Yes.
as far as I know, almost everybody I know that's not from the United States has to learn two languages at least, or at least they don't. Maybe they don't have to,
Actually,
but
it is a requirement. I remember as a child in Lebanon, as soon as you got into grade school, you immediately had to learn a second language. It was Arabic and either French or English. And it wasn't like, oh, it's a requirement. It was the norm.
norm, yeah,
You don't
yeah,
even think about it because that's the norm. You take both these languages, and there is no fear in it because that's what's expected out of you. So you do
yeah.
it.
I wonder where the exceptions are, but I feel like majority of people that I know that are from other countries either had to at least take, like you said, you have to take at least a second language. You don't have to be fluent, you just have to take another class in that. Or in some cases, we're very highly encouraged to be fluent in another language. And generally it's English because the majority of the world, even like I have a lot of students, teaching at UCSD, and they're all from all over the world. And I get a lot of input from them. It's really great because so many people are from different countries. And one of my Indian students from India said that the majority of the websites were in English because there's so many dialects in India. It's hard to unify them. So they say, well, just everybody knows English, so go there. Oh, yeah, it's really fascinating to me. um, but in a lot of cases, a lot of play people that I know come from other countries. They have to learn either the neighboring country's language, which brings me to a point here. Often, and if you think about it, a lot of countries in most of the world neighbor one another, have borders that are kind of cross between cultures. And the United States is so large that I don't think they have that opportunity except in the borders of Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the north, it's Canada, and Canada speaks English, with the exception of a few cities that
In
speak
French.
French.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so there's no real incentive to learn another language when everyone's speaking English, and the the borders are the only place where you have to deal with it. But if you're from Minnesota, you don't care, right? It's because the country's huge.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, I would think the same thing with like China or Russia, where there's where do you border? You're in the middle of that place. So there's nobody around you except anybody who speaks your native language or the languages that are within your country, like in China's case, like Mandarin and Cantonese, right? So I'm always fascinated by that. If you go through Europe or even the Middle East, like there's borders like right there. I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine what like Morocco or Turkey you go through because there's so many borders of other cultures. There's like Greece and like there's a Persian Empire is like right there. Like there's so many things going on right there. So I don't know. Given that your family is from there, um, did they have to learn English when they were younger, like your parents?
My mom used to teach French. She learned
French,
French because the French ruled Lebanon for so many years.
yeah,
So that was
right.
part of the norm that you have Arabic and French.
Mm-hmm.
Then later on, English got added because also the British Empire, I guess, went through
Sure.
Lebanon for a period of time.
Yeah,
But both these languages were always available for people to learn.
Right.
And like I said earlier, you don't think about it as part of being in school. Is you take both these languages, and most of them that actually go through all the way to college, they end up majoring in that second language, which isn't
Mm.
called a second language. It's the language that they're learning, because
Yeah.
you're automatically going to be learning Arabic as part of the culture of being in Lebanon, and
Sure.
then the
Yeah.
second language is a part of it.
Right.
And I've always found it intriguing, honestly, the countries that do speak English, because it does uniform the world
Mhm.
in being able to communicate better. We
Sure.
can speak any language that we please that comes with whatever region, whatever country, and so on. But having a uniformed language also at the same time is really impressive, to be able to communicate with anyone anywhere in the world.
Yes, I agree with that. And from my understanding, English is one of the hardest languages to learn in that context, because of the tenses and all the things that are going on with it. My college girlfriend was from Laos, and still is from Laos. She's still around. We're friends actually still, but um, her brother one time was trying to teach me Laos. He goes, "You just have to know the words. You don't have to know tenses. If it's like I go to the store, you don't say I went to the store. You just use tomorrow or yesterday in your sentence. You don't. There's no implication about where things were or how they are, except the words you choose to put in the sentence." So I found that kind of fascinating. I mean, it's tonal language, which is hard for me to understand at the time, because there's different tones mean something completely different. If I say
Mm,
hi versus hi, that can mean something completely different
wow.
in Lao, and in a lot of in a couple of the Southeast Asian countries. Um, but and I'm always fascinated, like, how does that develop? One, and for two, again, when you're encouraged to learn a different language, is it because the country just came in, in the past took over, or you have a neighbor, like in the case of like Austria, for example, they're next to Germany, so maybe it's just easier for them to learn German too, because there's a bigger culture there or something. And then English, because for a long time, I would say England, France, the Dutch, Portuguese, Spanish were very much about exploring, we'll just call it that, and going into other places, and developing that type of stuff. So that whole European continent pretty much was like very much like outwardly expanding, and then therefore kind of planted their seeds in a lot of different places. And that's why a lot of places like where you grew up, and a lot of friends of mine that grew up in other countries, they have to learn English or the other language I just mentioned, either English, French, Portuguese, like the Brazilians, or Spanish. And if you think about it, that's like a lot of people speak those different languages. Um, and I'm always fascinated where that comes from.
It's
And
so interesting you're saying that, because now you brought to my brain that the Turkish Empire also ruled Lebanon for a long period of time, yet they don't speak Turkish in Lebanon. They only
oh,
speak
interesting.
French and Arabic and English. Those are the three main languages. So why the influence didn't become also the Turkish, but then
Turkish. Yeah. Well,
and
maybe because Turkish also now speak English, because the trading around that, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. I'm not a historian or anything. I don't know that. But like uh, Turkey, I would say a lot. Turkey probably has a lot of cultures embedded in it, just because of where their neighbors are. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure the majority are Turkish, but like there's a bunch of other people that are kind of invading that area, or at least infiltrating on some level. Maybe not invading per se, but you get that area has Middle Eastern influence, and they have African influence, Greek, all that stuff is kind of there. So they probably had to learn a unified language, as you said earlier, where English was the easiest way to do that. I don't know if it's English 100%. Talk to our Turkish friends and family and fans. But aside from that, like I feel like that's the unified language just got easier, like you said. So they didn't think about it. They were like, well, hey, keep your own language, or Arabic. Probably more so Arabic, actually. And
Mhm.
because I think I know people who are Turkish also speak Arabic. So maybe that was the unified language that was there. So we don't have to, you don't have to learn our language. You know, we already know yours. It's the French who are like, I don't know that. Speak French. Right. You know, it's
It's
kind of that.
definitely a lot easier to learn languages as kids,
Yeah.
or when you are younger than as you get a little older, because you don't think about it. You just learn it. You
Yeah.
pick it up.
Just pick it
We,
up.
we were talking about your child. I mean,
Yeah.
she picks up language
Yeah.
easily
Just
now.
right now, picking up English. But between 1 and 2 is learning all that. I mean, even earlier than that, but I've noticed the development of her languages between 1 and 2. And so, and now she's 2. She can speak, you know, she's like becoming 3 soon, but she can speak sentences and ask questions and understand what I'm saying when I say certain things. So she totally gets it, you know. So, and that's amazing that some little creature can pick up all that stuff. I mean, you're teaching them to some level, but just by communicating, they learn it and pick it up, right? Even my cats pick it up.
What?
They can't speak back to me, but they know when I say something
Oh,
that
got
it
you.
means
Yes.
something.
Yes.
Right. It's like without even me necessarily training them on certain words. Like, yes, some words mean certain things to them. But if I say, go over there, like they do it. Because they know that I'm like, I don't want them where they're at that moment. I was like, hey, come here. You know, and I do that. And they're like, oh, sorry. You know, that means something. I don't, I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. So I should listen to what's going on. And so they pick up on it, you know.
I'm laughing because we have chickens, as you well know.
Yeah.
I got them about a year ago or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I speak to them, and the 3 little chicks that we raised from the beginning, they have names, and I call them and they understand their name. They'll come when I say their name. I don't care where they are in the yard.
Right.
They'll come running. It's like, and they'll stand next to us like, go eat, and they'll go eat. So yes, they understand too. They're highly intelligent.
Really? Yeah, it's so cool they do that. You know, it's that's fascinating that the chickens do it. And you think of them, you know, lesser life forms and stuff like that, but they understand. They get certain things. They're not going to be having a conversation with you, but they get certain trigger words and they understand the language.
Or they're having a conversation. We're just not understanding what they're saying. We're constantly saying stuff.
Yeah, when's she gonna feed us?
I have no
Maybe we just stand here and look at her.
It's funny because as you look at languages and kids, there's no fear. And I think that's one of the things that gets into us as we start to get a little older, is the fear that stops us in a lot of things, even in languages. Kids have no fear. They don't care if they're going to make a mistake. They don't have those thoughts within them till we begin instilling some of them into them.
We do, yeah. And you're right, because it becomes kind of like a xenophobia or something, like where you're afraid of things that are foreign to you. So you stick with your own for a long time. And I'm not saying everywhere is like that, but even as you're brought up in schools, growing up in the States, as I have, you don't start learning other languages until later. You gotta get into Spanish or French, or I even took a Latin class. But it's not encouraged when you're early grades, like little words here and there. Now, I went to a private school before I moved to Massachusetts. My father enrolled me in a private school when I was very little. I was like 5 years old. At the time, you know, public and private were like a big deal. Now they have all this different stuff with immersion schools, but you know, I'm in my 40s, so it's like years ago, right? I remember they encouraged multi-language learning. So I learned songs in French and how to count in Spanish. And so, you know, I think they were trying to groom people to speak different languages as they grew up, because they knew that the time, you know, between 4 and 6, and you know, you pick up so much and absorb so much. I still remember the things now, and I'm, you know, this is like 40 years later, you know. So but I feel that the schools here, like you said, they're kind of like, I feel like the adults kind of fear certain things, and like you said, we kind of put that on the kids, whereas the kids would love to learn or be immersed in certain things and try new things if you teach them that. It's funny, culturally, I grew up with multi types of cultures in my background, for one, or for two, always to be open-minded, right? Regardless, I didn't grow up with a lot of like other types of people when I was a kid, because I was in a small town Massachusetts. So there was primarily Portuguese, white, black, like a little bit of Asian people, like four that I knew, and then I mentioned my high school girl was from Iran. She's like the only Iranian I've ever known in that place. And she probably, her and her mom were probably the only one, at least within a certain radius, right? Then I came to college, it was completely different, right? But when I talk to people that grew up, especially when they grew up in California, um, depends on who it is, but a lot of them are exposed for some reason that they don't, or maybe it's just maybe it's not where they grew up, but like how they grew up. It's like they weren't encouraged to try new things, so I had to get them to try new things. Certain people that I knew, I can think of a couple of people off the top of my head that I'm like, they didn't never had sushi until I introduced it to them, or they didn't have certain foods, or they wouldn't eat a certain thing until I introduced it to them. You know, and it's like there's some weird fear where if you're not used to eating certain things, you only eat this particular thing. You don't want to try new stuff. Why? You know, and so it's unfortunate because you can learn so much from each other just by the food, let alone talking to people and being open to what their experiences are. But just the food wise, that would help you understand something, at least something about them.
I think that's so neat. My nephew was taking a Spanish class
Yeah.
in college recently, and he loves the professor. And it's someone that we're going to bring onto the show. The way that she taught them Spanish is by allowing them to do a lot of different projects within the class about the culture, about different aspects of it. So you're learning the language without thinking about learning the language, because your mind is occupied in doing the project, learning about the culture, learning about the different aspects of it. So she brings in the culture part and the open-mindedness, at least that's what I understood from his conversation.
Yeah.
And allows them to learn without specifically going, you need to learn Spanish, you need to learn these words, you need. And you could tell that he thoroughly enjoyed it and really excelled at it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't focused on simply learning the words, but actually getting immersed in it, which is basically what you're saying, is being open minded and learning and becoming a part of something. All of a sudden opens up your brain waves and your ability to actually absorb it even more and gets rid of that fear. At least that's how I see it.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that's what it is. I think the advantage that people have that have neighboring countries could go to another country and be immersed a lot easier than it would be for someone who's in the States that would have to find a family to hang out with, and rather than just go to a region and be like, well, I'm here, here. Okay, I have to adapt. If I go to Europe, if I'm in Italy, I'm with Italians, so I totally agree. That was what you're saying is how I kind of got used to it. When I went to USC for undergrad, right? And I had never been there, and I met my first year people from almost every country you could think of, and countries I never heard of. When I grew up, I never heard of where Sri Lanka was. And then one of my office flat, what do you call them? What do you call people that are in the same building as you? Dorm. Dorm. When you're sleeping in the dorms, like diagonally from me was two guys. One was from Sri Lanka, the other was from Bangladesh. I never heard of either one of those countries. And then they, were very open, as I was, because I was. Another thing is not to be afraid to ask questions. So there's a couple of things that have to happen. The people that are curious and never been involved with you have to be open to going into it there, and then not being afraid to ask a question of something they don't know, that they're not familiar with. And then the people that are receiving them have to be open to that, the fact that they don't know, and not shun those people. Because that's what happens, is that a lot of times people walk into a place and they're looked down upon because they don't get the culture and the rules. And so one thing happens versus another. They either are afraid or they get ostracized and picked on, or whatever those things are. Whereas, my experience, again, this is college, was the opposite. Obviously, they're in America, but they were in Los Angeles, where USC was. But I would ask them questions about their culture. Hey, Sri Lanka. I never heard of Sri Lanka. Where is that? They're like, "Yeah, I'll show you." And then the guy, he had a map, and he showed me where it was. See this big land island off of India? It's right there. I was like, "Oh, no kidding! I never heard of that." He's like, "Yeah, yeah." He's showing me all this stuff, and then when I got introduced to them, they hung out with other people. So a lot of their friends were from like South Asia, Southeast Asia. So I got to meet people from Pakistan and Burma and Laos and Thailand and Vietnam, and so all of a sudden I had this South Asian, Southeast Asian conglomerate of people that I was hanging out with, and I was like the token American guy there. And even me, I'm like multicultural to begin with, so they had their whatever versions of America was inside of me. I wasn't just the English guy. I had other stuff too. Um, so yeah, it was really kind of interesting. And as you said, when you're immersed in it, you kind of learn from them and pick up things like habits or certain things or way to eat food, and like just you have to kind of adapt. I got to a point where I would go with my Sri Lankan friend. I went to one of his temples one time for a class actually, and then they had food and I was eating like they were. And one of the guys asked me, he's like, "Are you from Sri Lanka?" I was like, "No." he's like, "Oh, well, you're eating like us." I'm like, "Well, yeah." We're all here. And he's like, "Oh, okay." So he wasn't used to people, outsiders, being open to that.
I think you said the neatest thing about what you did when you asked with curiosity.
Yeah.
You weren't asking because you were attempting to make fun of them or anything
Right.
that's rude. You were curious about them. And we have such an opportunity within our world to begin that process of teaching from the beginning kids about the variety of places and the variety of cultures that are within our world.
Yes.
That in itself opens up so much leeway for people to be a lot more understanding, kinder, and a lot more open to each other. Because I remember when I moved to the States, I spoke very, very, very little English, even though I took like a year or so in Lebanon before we were coming, when we knew we were moving to the States. But still, the words that I knew weren't much as I got here. So when we got to the States and I began learning English, there was always this fear or this thing that's running through my head as they're talking to me, as if they're judging me or making fun of me. The way that they would ask stuff. And I don't blame the kids. It's something completely new to them, a new culture, someone who talks differently, looks different, and so on. So we have such an opportunity, as I look at it, to begin to actually emerge people into different cultures on purpose. From the beginning through our schooling, especially now with the internet where you can reach anywhere in the world. Wouldn't it be neat to be able to take kids through classes in various parts of the world so that they see how others live, how others think, how others speak, and really begin that journey of allowing people to become a lot more connected? That's ultimately how I look at it, because you feel so isolated when even it's just a language barrier, it isolates you in some way. So breaking that away would make such a huge difference.
Yeah, it's really difficult, as you said, when you're going into a place where everyone else is one way and you're the other way, or you have something slightly different about you, and then you walk into it, and it's like, and as you said, kids can be kind of cruel in some cases, or at least not intentionally. They just like, well, I don't know, you don't get what I'm saying. I got to walk away from you. But you have to teach that that's not sensitivity, and that's a thing I'll touch on in a minute, but more of like the empathy, or at least just ask, hey, what's going on with you? Hey, do you want to try this? And there's something you can do beyond language. I remember this kid who ended up becoming one of the popular kids in high school, but when we were in grade school, I don't know if he remembers this. His name was Carlos. He was from Portugal, and no one was talking with him, but I'm a different looking kid anyway too. So I like came up to him, I was like, "Hey, you want to play?" And he would say something about ball, Yeah. Oh, you want to play ball? Guess so. We got it was like indoor recess because it was raining or something, and we were playing. He and I were playing the little basketball, and I was like, I don't know, second grade or something. But I had just moved there from California to Massachusetts about a year ago, so I understood what it was like to be the foreign kid, except I understood the language. you know but that was kind of the idea. I developed empathy by being that. I had to, and I also look different. I'm multiracial, so I don't really fit in everywhere I go. Doesn't matter who I'm hanging out with. They always think I'm there, that race. Funny enough, if you and I are hanging out, they probably think we're siblings. Yes, because we have the same hair, same kind of skin tone, and so but and there's some advantages of that now, but back then not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And but there are things you can do that are even beyond language, and that's why I'm always like, I love that's why food is such a great thing. In music, I think food and
Yes.
music are the best unifiers in terms of crossing boundaries and barriers. Because if you could at least appreciate that, you're then open to hearing more about what's going on with other stuff. Like, say, hey, I like some foods that are this. Yeah, well, try this dish. Great. Let's talk. Okay, come over to my side for a little while. Hang out with me. This is how we eat it in my culture. Hey, why don't you come over here a little bit further? This is how we dress in my culture. Hey, over here too. This is how we speak. And then all of a sudden you're now open. It allows some kind of gateway. I mean, I don't want to make it superficial, but that's the first thing people react to, because they can all relate to taste. You can all relate to sound, right? Because visuals, they're just a shell, right? But if they can taste something, ooh, well, this is good. Yeah, right. This is what my culture does. Check this out. And they're like, oh, I need to know about your culture, just like get more of that food. And then it starts that way, but then it opens things up a little bit more. Hopefully they don't trivialize it and be like, I only want to eat burritos and I don't want to talk to you about Spanish stuff. But that being said, I think it's a great introduction. That was one thing I learned even in college, where we had like a multicultural table of food, and people brought their own dishes, their own traditional dishes from their country, because they just came from there.
Mm.
And freshman year of college, they're in a different place, but they brought their own stuff to some of our functions, and that was amazing. It's like, oh, I get so many things, and I want to know more about them anyway. But that was a great introduction. It's like, you have great food at your place. We're gonna get more of that. What word do I have to learn to understand how to get that? And that's kind of
such a
it.
great conversation starter is food,
Yeah,
like you said. As
yeah,
soon as you begin talking about food, people open up. It's like, oh, let me tell you about it. They
yeah.
get all excited.
They excited for sure. And it's funny, look, as you said, when you get immersed in the culture, you have to learn certain words to trigger certain things that you like, right? So as you said, how the teacher was teaching it was more immersive, because they're not like saying, hey, you have to learn the language. It's like, to get this water bottle, you're gonna have to know agua in Spanish, right? So you have to kind of understand what that means. Like, oh, how do I say water? Agua. Oh, okay, agua, holder of the agua. And then you start understanding a little bit more, and then you're not, you don't have to, you want to. At that point, you're not forced to. You're not doing it for a test. You're doing it because you want something that's happening within the thing that's going on there. And I think that's the way it really should be. We shouldn't be testing. As a matter of fact, they should probably not grade learning a language. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you take, I got an A in Spanish. So what? Yeah, I mean, like, it should be like, no, just, I learned how to say these things in Spanish. I learned how to communicate. That shouldn't even be a grade. It should just be like, this is part of the thing
I
to do.
agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you, because it's so much bigger than that grade level that they're giving you.
Right.
It's opening up your mind, opening up your cultures, opening up so many ways for you to communicate and now actually connect with a whole range of people.
Right.
So those grades, I'm not much on grades to begin with,
Right.
because it doesn't allow the opportunity for someone to really delve in and learn. And I think that's why I love when they teach the arts and music and all of it, because it opens up people to connect in
Hmm.
a different way than being graded or having
Yeah.
to learn a specific something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a really good concept to introduce. And I'm sure there would be volunteers in different communities that would say, hey, I'll teach my language to whoever's interested, once a week or whatever it is. And you don't, then that way you don't have to, you can have volunteer work, and it doesn't have to be part of the curriculum. It could be just, hey, it's recess, and then we have language immersion, or culture immersion, maybe just more so culture. And then part of the culture is speaking the language, right? So you start learning different things, and I don't know, every month you switch to the next one, or maybe every year you do. I don't know.
I think that would be so neat to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Especially with the internet, again, being so available to be able to drop in anywhere in the world and have someone teach directly from where they are.
Right.
You could teach a whole bunch of classes to a variety of places.
Yeah, you could reach, like how we're talking right now. I mean, we're in the same, city, more or less, but still, we can just do a Zoom and get on a call. I don't have to drive all the way up to where you are, or you all the way down here. And vice versa. You could, like, someone in that actual country could be teaching you that, right? You can say, hey, we're actually talking to someone that's in Spain right now. They're like, yeah, hi, this is what my meal looks like. We just point to, like, hey, this is what we're eating today. This is where my family is. This is what we do in the morning, and the afternoon we do this, and evening we do this. So that would be really great. I think that should be like part of everyone's curriculum across the world.
I actually am going to give you credit, because when you're teaching your classes to the universities, I've noticed that you are really great at allowing the cultural part to become a part of how you teach to the variety of students.
Oh yeah,
you pick that up so well that
thank you. Yeah,
I think it's a neat trait to have as we do business across the world, as we do a variety of things. The way I look at everything is, how do we make this world a more connected place so that people are kinder, people are more understanding, all of it. So even this tidbits that we're talking about, if people begin to simply stop for a second, go, how is this impacting me, and how is it impacting someone else? If I'm asking them about their food, if I'm asking them about their language, am I coming from a curiosity perspective and really looking to learn and understand? Or am I looking at it from a perspective of shaming them because they don't speak my language, or judging, or any of that stuff?
Right.
That's a completely different aspect. You do such a great job with the variety of students of making them feel welcome in your classroom.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for saying that. And that I do strive to help with that. Maybe not as actively as I think, but I think I naturally do it that way now. But it was a challenge when I first started teaching, because I would get a variety of different people. So I'm like, well, how do I relate to them? Thankfully I went to, again, a school that I have friends from everywhere, so it wasn't that hard. But it is, it's important that they feel comfortable. And so even if they're not out of their element, or they're not really understanding everything, I want them to feel comfortable enough to talk about it. So the first step is to do that, is to ask them about what's going on with their world and empathize with them. Like, hey, okay, let's talk about that. Oh, that's interesting. Where are you from? Great. Oh my gosh. And now say something that I know that relates to them, and not just like, I eat spaghetti because you're from Italy, you know what I mean? It's the food thing, again, only goes so far, so you can't just be that, so but it just comes with life experience and talking with people enough, right? But I think it's really important. And to be honest with you, I love the fact that we have differences. I love the fact that we have all this variety. Was like, a variety is a spice of life, I always find it bizarre when people don't want that, or they want their own way, or they shame you into thinking a certain thing. And like, just ask the questions. Like, it's fun, to get to know each other. I'm glad you're different. If everyone was like me, it would be terrible. As much as I like myself, I don't want everyone to be like me. It would be boring. I wouldn't learn anything. You want people to be a little bit different. The mindset should be similar in terms of being open, loving, not causing people harm, and just trying to understand one another. But the rest of it is just, let's go down the path of all the stuff you're going through. So I'd rather have a variety. I find it, like I said, I find it bizarre when people don't want variety.
If it wasn't for the differences, people wouldn't travel anywhere. What
Right.
would you travel for?
Why
I
would you
mean,
go
you
anywhere?
travel to see the variety of cultures, the foods, and
Yeah.
the mentality and everything else. Otherwise, you're right. Everybody would be the same. And truly, who would like to live in a world where everyone is the same?
Right.
There'd be
Yeah.
nothing there.
I mean, nothing to do, nothing. Yeah. You wouldn't learn anything. You wouldn't grow, So I think that, I think on some level you have to, and especially with even just people of your own culture, let alone then you learn other different cultures and start getting expanding outward into that. And we have the ability, like you said, with the internet and the way travel is now, it's easier. Back in the day, you had to go on a horse and buggy. Now it's like you take a plane somewhere, or now I can dial somebody up on the internet, not even dial, just like I'm connected to the internet. I think I'll talk to someone in Sweden right now. You're able to do that, or you have family in your home country. You can talk to them. Like if they have internet, let's all connect tonight. Okay, great. What time is it there? Well, the time zone is different, but they can still get online. Hopefully it's not 3 a.m. But yeah, we live in a very grateful. I'm very grateful for the world we live in now, where we're so interconnected that we can just not even where we are now with our laptops and stuff, but devices we carry with us around. These rectangles we have in our pockets, and wherever you keep them, you could literally do that. Well, what's this from? I want to learn from this place. I'll go to Turkey today. And you totally do that. It's fascinating. And yeah, I don't know. I could get into whole like land wars and disputes and all that other stuff that's going on. I could also talk about like cancel culture. Like there's a lot of things that are peripherally tangentially related to that, but that would take another hour. I'm sure talking about those things. But
What's still running through my mind when you were speaking earlier and you mentioned that you moved from California as a child to the East Coast.
Yeah.
And you could feel the difference. And you're
Yeah.
right here within the United States.
Yeah.
One country, one nation,
yeah,
one language, and you can still feel the differences. So even within neighborhoods,
yeah,
people need to take the time and the opportunity to open up and really get to know the person. It may not be a language to start with, but it might be the nuances of that area.
yeah, yeah. I was born in California, technically, but I have family in the East Coast, and where my mother's from is the East Coast, Massachusetts. Now, when I moved to Massachusetts, I was going to school in California. Matter of fact, I skipped a grade. The education level was different, and I was, I guess, to my own horn here, a little too advanced. They put me in second grade eventually. I was in first grade at the time. But when I moved back, my grandmother, who became my caretaker, was like, "You're already young. My birthday is in the summer, in June, essentially." And it was already late for even first grade. I would have been really young. I would have been like a 5-year-old in second grade. So she was like, "I put you back where the kids your own age were," because you'd have had a hard time. And I'm grateful she did that. But again, like you said, there was a difference between the cultures. I was in an urban environment in California. I went to a rural environment in Massachusetts, which is literally, you can almost can't get much further away than those two spots in Los Angeles and Boston area. I'll just say Boston adjacent because it wasn't Boston. And I was in a small town or a large town. So I went from this urban area to a rural area. And then, like you said, culturally, I didn't know any Mexicans in Massachusetts. Whereas in California, you're right next to Mexico, But in Massachusetts is more of the Portuguese population. And it was a lot more of that culture there. So I understood that more. Right? And then whatever culture was living there, obviously. But so just like you said, those two areas, enough differences to try to adapt. Thankfully, we had the similar language. But think about how countries are. If we were divided into countries, and Massachusetts was a country, I'm from a tribe, actually. Native American tribes live there that I'm from. And they speak different languages. So it's like, you could get a whole different experience just by going somewhere. It could be, like you said, the same language, but not the same culture. Right. So not the same culture there. So I had to learn, I had to adapt, I had to become friends. And it took people to go, hey, I still remember the kid who did that. You want to play?
Mm.
There's a friend of mine named Kevin. And he was the first person to come up to me because I was sitting by myself, say, you want to play? Oh, okay, yeah, of course I do. But then that opened things up, and then now I know their family and other families. And so it's really, I don't know, it takes someone to reach out and for the other person to also reach back up and go, okay, yeah, I'd like to take your hand and let's go on this journey together now we're together, let's just take each other's hands and show each other no, and feed one another and listen to our music and then ask them questions. I think that's all it takes.
For me, I remember the first year I was in the States, um, there were two people, three actually, and
Yeah.
one teacher that made that difference, that they reached out and made it all more than okay.
Yeah.
One of them was a young lady that happened to be in my gym class that became
Mm.
a great friend. She stood behind me and supported me in a lot of things because she's on her own, she paid attention
Yeah.
of the things that I was noticing I was uncomfortable with. And then the English as a second language class, where there were two other kids from Israel in there, where in the Middle East, they don't get along maybe, but definitely in the States, we got along
Yeah, it was.
wonderfully. Everything was great. They were my best friends. And even
Yeah.
though we couldn't speak completely, but we could get along. And then the teacher herself, who made us feel welcome. Literally,
Yeah.
she would
Yeah.
welcome us into the class and just made you feel like you're the number one person in that room.
Yeah.
That made such a big difference in that first year in
Yeah.
allowing things to just continue to move forward.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of what that kid did for you by asking you to come and play.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I think also teachers were the instrumental part of that as well. The people that are very, empathetic and caring to the new people that are there. Hey, try this. But that's great that you had a variety. That's funny that you say that the people that were there culturally, if they were in their own respective cultures, probably wouldn't get along. But because they're both part of something completely new, they're like, whatever our differences are doesn't matter anymore.
We're no differences.
We're in a whole different system right now.
Yes. But that's the key, actually, Alan. What we're
Yeah.
talking about for people to open up
Yeah.
is to allow that bit of give me your hand and let's move forward.
Yeah.
So as we look at cultures throughout the world and a lot of the differences that people point out, there are differences in what makes us unique.
Right.
Opening it up to allow the person to come in and see it without judging it is the key.
Yes. Yes. I will stand by that statement that you just said, because without judgment, that's a really key important thing that you have to come across when you're trying to understand somebody. You want to come across, you don't have to, I don't believe in watching your words per se. I believe in asking genuinely. And when you ask genuinely, your words naturally come off as, hey, I am interested. I want to know more. And you're not, hopefully you won't be judged back by what? You're ignorant, or you don't know, if they're judging you back, then you don't talk to those people. Right? They're jerks. That crosses all cultures. And good people do too. So you have to kind of go, okay, well, if you're coming from a place of warmth and trying to understand and natural curiosity, then people don't feel, then they feel less guarded. And I had that happen with racial cultures within the United States, or cultures from outside of the United States, or gay, lesbian, transgender, what didn't matter. I met a lot of different people who explained certain things to me, and in a lot of cases changed my viewpoint, because my original viewpoint, it was only from the outside of not knowing what's going on there. And even though I was, fairly open-minded kid, I still had biases. And that's what we have to understand, that people come from these long line of biases that they have to get used to. Now they're exposed to everything in the universe and through the internet. And then what happens is that you get into this filter bubble in your searches. You go, I'm only looking up things that are important to me. And then when you're forced into a cultural change, or even talking to a neighbor that's, or someone right next to you that all of a sudden is something different than what you thought, then when that happens, what I encourage is don't shun it and don't run away from it. Just ask what that's like for them. Even if it's just natural curiosity. You don't have to go, oh, what's it like? And write down notes or whatever. But just ask them, oh, that's interesting. And chat and share your experiences. And if they're interested and they're good people, you'll develop friendships. I mean, that's what I had. I had friendships from all walks of life, everything I just mentioned. People that are, from different, married couples that are gay, and and everyone from different parts of the world, within the United States, people from different parts of that and different places they grew up with. And the common denominator was that they were open to my questions and or comments enough to teach me, and vice versa. So that's what it turned into. Oh, okay, now I get it. And again, it changed completely changed my mindset. I mean, I think I was on the right trajectory, but it would have took me a lot longer to learn the lessons I learned those 4 years that I was in the university, and not from classes. It was definitely not from the classrooms.
No.
I don't even think I learned anything from
this. You got what you needed out of college.
Yeah, I got exactly. Let's just call it like that.
Yes.
That's exactly, you put it perfectly. You got what you needed out of college. Exactly. Enough said.
For me, the best part in moving from Lebanon to the States and going through the time periods is learning to put myself in the other person's shoes and mentality.
Yeah.
It's seeing like where are they coming from, and that takes a lot.
It does.
That takes a lot to be able to go, how are they judging me, and why are they judging me this way? What have they been exposed to or not exposed to, which is even bigger than what are you exposed to. And when I began to do that through the years, I opened up. I became a lot less judgmental.
Yeah.
Some of my biases began to go away, and I began to see a person as a person. It's like they're talking to me because that's what they've seen.
Right.
That's what they've understood.
Yeah.
So switching it around and being in their spot, and even going to the point of intentionally not taking it personal as much as I can when they are speaking, that they're not speaking to me.
Right.
Even they're talking to me, but they're not speaking to me. They're speaking to wherever they are in their life and what they know out of their circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's such an eye-opener and changer of how I associate with people.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will think that I don't put enough boundaries in a sense, but I really have so much boundaries in breaking down the boundaries.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. It's like, how else am I gonna get to know the person? The person is gonna be given the opportunity to open up and learn.
Yes. Yeah. And if your heart's there, then it's like, well, then it's my job to reach out with my hand and say, hey, I know you're saying a lot of stuff right now. Why don't you take my hand for a little? I'm gonna show you something, and then pull them towards you a little bit more. And then they, oh, okay. And then they may be reluctant, but eventually start understanding that. And because you're offering your hand, you're not offering a fist. You're going, hey, let me think. Hey, you want to take my hand for a minute? Let's come over here for a second. It'll be kind of fun. Or whether we're breaking certain barriers, and it's really important for the people that understand that to keep that in mind, because, like you said, everybody's coming from their own cultural biases. I think the term racism is thrown around a little too loosely now, because it's just a thing you just get people accused of, and I think it's more cultural bias than anything. They just don't know, like you said, they don't know what they don't know, so they have preconceived notions of other people. And of course you get some people who just they hate it, but for the most part, most people want their own thing, be left alone and be cool with each other. And if you ask 90% of the planet, they just want to eat, be around loved ones, maybe a little internet here and there, and that's all they care about. They don't want anything else.
I don't know if I'd put internet as my top choices.
No, but
I understand what you're saying.
I make my living off of it, so that's how I eat.
Got you.
So I need a little bit off of that, my internet marketing experience. But that being said, it's like even before the internet, it's family, the hierarchy of needs taken care of: food, shelter, family. Those are the center pieces. There's some people want a little more here and there, but for the most part, the center of what they want is that. And so if you're able to talk to them on that level and relate to them on that level, they'll be more open to whatever it is you're going through, right? And that's where it becomes, now we're bridging the gaps because we're sharing a common experience, with life. That's the real common experience, but they don't see it that way. So you got to show some other things. All right, here's my food. Oh, here's how I live. Oh, and then you get into the sociological stuff. Oh, this is how I was brought up, blah, blah, language, etc. So I think that that's why it's important to relate to people like that. And if you have the ability to, and you're surrounded by what I would consider ignorant statements, you kind of have to be like, okay, that's interesting. You say it that way, and you're not judging. Well, let me ask you a question, or let me share something with you, or let's talk about that. And not even in a way that you're accusing of anything. It's just like, hey, let's talk about that. That's an interesting point of view. And then eventually, because you're open, they're like, oh, I had a girl, I won't get into names, but when in high school, I was like, you're cool. And I was like, okay, thanks. She's like, no, I don't know a lot of people that are basically, I'm part also Black, and she never really had a Black friend. And I'm not even dark, I'm like light skinned by comparison, because I'm only like a quarter African. But she's like, yeah, she was like so fascinated by that because we got along on all these levels and stuff like that. She had never had a friend like that. Then fun enough, fast forward, she had married a Black guy, like a dark guy, But it was just like, I guess I was the bridge to that, opening her up a little bit, in some. We were just friends. We were like in high school or something. But it's just really fascinating when people get to that stage and they just not exposed to the right person. And you might be, in your case, the right person for a lot of people because you're open and you open your heart. Like you said, you don't put the boundaries up. Well, I don't have boundaries. Most people don't even want to get to know all of stuff. They don't want it. They never ask us. That's why I'm here. I show you what you want to see. And I'm also wondering what you're going on. So I let you in. You can't do much damage to me. I don't have any boundaries. Keep walking all you want. There's no fences you can break. Right? Where's the fence? There's no fence. Don't worry about it.
Because you're me and I'm you, and we're all connected.
Yeah, unless you're trying to hurt me, mm-hmm. Then I'll keep you out. But otherwise, if you're not trying to hurt me, then we're good.
Now, it took a while to arrive at this state of who I am.
Sure.
But I'm so grateful for all the background to allow me to open up and become exactly what I am today. And I see what we're talking about, even for relationships, for companies. Yeah. Really opening up that communication and really coming from an understanding perspective for things to actually begin to alter.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Which is where a lot of the breakdown happens. Yeah. Even in today's world with all our incredible technology that's supposed to keep us connected. And I know we say that a lot of times when we talk, but they're not the connection piece. We are. That's a great point. Yeah. So. Yeah. And you have to actively seek those things. It doesn't automatically connect you to other people. You have to look for it. And connect with good intentions. Yeah, exactly. The right intentions. The right intentions, not looking for some way to mess with them. That would be funny if like you get online, but you can't get on the same website every single time. You have to go to the different one. I have this one's in Turkey right now, or this one's in Spain. Like, oh, I gotta learn Spanish today. I can only interact in Spanish now. Thank God for Google translators, huh? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been great. I think our audience is definitely thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Conversation. I would be really curious, anyone listening to this right now, that what is their experience in either crossing cultural barriers, friend barriers,
If you were from another country and you're living in another country right now, or if you're first generation and your parents are, that's the other thing I learned. Like when people's parents are from the different generation, they don't speak the language as well, so they have to communicate through their children. You know, evidence, right? And so, but it's cool. It's kind of neat that they do that, and I find that you're like this conduit that like kind of helps bridge certain things. So if anyone has anything, I would love them to write in or comment on the website. Anything would be really, really helpful to hear what you have to say. Maybe we'll get you on the show and talk about that.
That would be amazing. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time for another great conversation.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.